We're good?
So now's a bad time to spill it, I think.
To what? To spin it?
Now's a bad time to spill it.
Spill?
Yeah,
why would I
it's
spill
flying.
the bubble?
It's on our YouTube already.
That's it?
Yeah, it will be directly broadcasted to our millions of viewers.
Oh boy, spin it down. Watch out.
Our whole 7 subscribers.
That's wild. Getting there strong. Never know. If one person is guided to the right path because of you, this is better than everything in the dunya wa ma fiha. Everything in the world, from the beginning of creating till the end of time. Okay. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Usually we like to try to at least go to 7 and then see if anybody has any Q&A. But real quick, you're all college students, so just a quick quiz to see who was here and paying attention last week. Without looking at your little notes, I saw you try to peek just now. What was the name of the hairdresser in the palace of Pharaoh?
Oh, never told.
We don't know. Both? Okay, alhamdulillah. Thought I got you. What's the verse that I mentioned to you about justice in the Quran? Yes.
It's written in Psalm 135.
Yeah, excellent. Wow, see, this is very good. So if anybody wants to give you any arguments, you could just tell them, boom, chapter 4, verse 135. Just tell them that, and then inshallah there'll be no arguments. Okay? We mentioned how many children, from the collection of narrations, how many children spoke when they were youth in the cradle, that age, how many total?
6.
Name them.
Okay, so there was the Yusuf's witness.
Mm-hmm.
There was Isa, alayhi salam.
Isa alayhi salam.
There was the child in Jurayj's story.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There was the hairdresser's child, I believe.
The hairdresser's child?
The hairdresser's
Mhm.
infant child.
4.
Short here. Only 4?
2 more you need.
Right. Okay, so I have no clue.
One we went over and one we didn't go over. Who can help him? He's short too. He said, the Isa, alayhi salam, the prophet Jesus, Isa, the witness from the story of Yusuf, alayhi salam. He said the child from the story of Jurayj. He said the hairdresser's son.
Wasn't there also the
4.
the child of the woman from the story of Ashab al-Ukhdud?
Yes, the people of the ditch, 5. Last one. It's a good thing I'm not quizzing you on stuff we talked about 2 weeks ago.
Oh yeah, I'm dead there.
When we went over role models. Role models was the week before this one. You don't remember? Huh?
Oh,
Yeah.
I remember. It was the child with
No.
the unnamed child with the lady who she saw a
Was
rich man.
breastfeeding.
Yeah,
Yes.
breastfeeding him. Saw a rich man, and he said,
Mhm.
"Let
Okay,
him."
jazakallah khair.
They call me Hafid for nothing.
See that? MashaAllah.
3 brothers of Tawheed.
Okay. So now, alhamdulillah, we went over injustice. Now we're going to just give examples of justice and how we can benefit from them. Because this is one of the things that we have to recognize, and we mentioned this last week, that do you think a tyrant believes he's a tyrant? He himself, and most likely not, because that's the reason he thinks he's doing something for the better of something, right? No matter what that is. And that path that defines that person's actions, decisions, and everything, everyone has their own. Islam teaches us we have that path, and we believe as Muslims that will lead to ultimate justice on earth if we just follow it. Some people thought that they had it figured out by survival of the fittest, right? Hitler's mentality. And that didn't work out so well. Other people feel that a nationalistic attitude is the way to go. A nationalistic way and belief, and like we mentioned last week, right? We're going to bring democracy to XYZ. Well, who told you they want it? Who told you they want it? Maybe they just want to be farmers. And does that mean that they don't have any type of similar democratic process? Things like that. Just challenging that the ideas that we're born and raised with may not be as perfect as we thought. But we welcome anyone to challenge any type of ruling or law in the Quran, and to see if they would win that challenge. And we highly doubt that, alhamdulillah. The Prophet ﷺ, he told us, especially this side of the room, the guys, he said that your children have a right over you to choose for them a righteous mother. To choose for them a righteous mother, because she's really going to be setting the example, teaching them right from wrong. Whether she tells them, hey, don't say a bad word when something bad happens, say Alhamdulillah, say all praises, blessings be to Allah, you know, things like that. They have a right over you. And why do we say that? Because if you don't start, that's a lesson that we learn as Muslims, that it starts at a very young age. That if you start teaching these kids to be fair, to share, and for not to move away from the immediate gratification, right? To that immediately when something that they do well, they should get rewarded immediately like that. The more that you give that kind of reward system to these children, the more spoiled they become later on in their lives, because they're never delayed a reward. They're never delayed any type of gratification. And as Muslims, we sacrifice a lot. Obviously, right? You can, and even non-Muslims see that. You know, how could you not drink alcohol? It's just so much fun. A little bit of everything's okay. You know, you hear them tell you this kind of thing. But you come back and you say, well, you look at the root of it. The Prophet ﷺ said, whatever makes you intoxicated in large amounts is forbidden for us in small amounts. So we move away from that kind of practice completely. But if you just are patient in the dunya, you wind up getting it in the akhirah. So obviously there's drinking and everything in paradise, but it's not the type that would make you lose your intellect. That's the difference. It would be the type that allows you to have amazing amounts of fun, large amounts of fun, and it doesn't have any of the negative repercussions like, you know, hungover, headaches, throwing up in a car. Just speak to an Uber driver. He'll tell you everything on a Thursday night or a Friday night. And you could kind of even smell that. Some of you have ever ridden Uber, and you know that the last people before you, and that's why I hate riding Uber on Saturday or Sunday. The smell is just still there. It's disgusting. But nonetheless, I go on tangents. You guys know this, but it's fine. Anyhow, so what we need to understand is a person, if you ever enter in positions of power, you have to understand how to control that power. You have to understand when to learn how to give it up. Because as Muslims, it's not in our creed. Understand this very different, because a lot of Muslim leaders, unfortunately, they think that once they're elected the leader of a particular country, that they're that leader until they die. Even there was a famous joke that George Bush W, you know, the last fella that was president, he said, you know, I wish I was like these kings. Once they become king, they're just king till they die. He goes, I got to give this up after 8 years. You know, even though we didn't like him, even though this guy makes him look like, you know, diamonds, if you will, but nonetheless, you come back and ask yourself something. So then where did this practice start? Why is it that for the most part, all of the Muslim countries, that's it. He's elected until he dies. Why? And just because Abu Bakr, because you have to understand some history here, after the Prophet ﷺ passed away, Abu Bakr became the leader, Khalifa. After he passed away, Umar became the leader. After Umar passed away, Uthman became the leader. But they really, you have to understand something. The Sahaba, this was the best generation, number one. Number two, had there been a more qualified individual, then they would have given them the position. Who can you name at the time of Umar more qualified than Umar? The non-Muslims put him as one of the top most influential people in the history of the world. He's not even a prophet. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you obviously know this, he's the number one most influential person in the history of the world. Isa's up there, the prophet Jesus, and a few others. Umar, not being a prophet, I think, he's up there as well. So who was more knowledgeable? Who was better fit to lead at that time? But then you see another practice of the companions, like Al-Hasan, when he stepped down, you remember, I said, no, you know, this is getting a little too crazy, I'm moving away from it. He decided, I want to save my akhirah without jeopardizing my dunya. So I want to just put a little bit of a disclaimer here, that in the Muslim world here, you're not leader till you die, right? There can be a process where we re-elect every period. And who said 8 years was the perfect period, by the way? right? As students in academia, maybe 8 years isn't enough. Maybe it's too much. Maybe it should be 10, right? And maybe the system needs to be changed a little bit because it seems that everybody just gets reelected automatically, right? And then so they do nothing for 4 years, and then the last 4 years is when they really stick the plan together. But you see, things like that, don't think that just because something worked for 300 years is the same way that it should continue. So the Prophet ﷺ mentioned to us about a righteous king, about a righteous leader in Musnad Imam Ahmad. He said in the past there was a man in his kingdom. And in another narration, he mentioned that he actually was the king of Jerusalem. He was the king of Jerusalem. And he said while he was there, he started to reflect and thinking and realized that what he had would not last forever. So he took, and that most of what he's doing is taking him away from worshiping Allah. Now understand something, everybody has this thing where you are distracted. Some of it is fine, right? Others, if we're really delved into it, too much, obsessed with it, it causes a problem. And we each know we have one of these things that some of us do. I remember back in, even when I was in college, the thing that would ruin us, there was a game called Go Cross Campus. I don't think they have it right now. We had to compete against different universities. And so, for example, all the tech universities in the United States, some of them, it was MIT and I think Stevens and Harvey Mudd and a few others as well, RPI. And we had to compete against it. It was a game. It was a long story short. We were obsessed with it that semester. We all did horrible in our grades. I mean, we used to meet up in the student government office literally till 3 a.m. strategizing how we're going to beat these people. We had one goal in mind, obviously, was to take out Stevens and take out MIT. And besides that, we didn't care if we won or lost. Nonetheless, if you become overly obsessed with something, it really takes you off being razor focused on what you need to get done. So anyhow, he said he recognized this. He's reflecting, and in one narration that he's sitting on the roof of Masjid al-Aqsa. He's sitting on the roof of Masjid al-Aqsa, obviously praying Qiyam al-Layl, which is something very, very righteous to do. So he says one night, but his people loved him so much. So what he had to do, in the middle of the night, he escaped from his palace and he just ran completely away until he reached the people in the narration says towards the shore. Why? Because he said he found them there and they weren't living like in a more city type environment. Jerusalem was always a city, major city, bustling with trade and things like that. And that's why that first railroad actually would come to the side, a little west of Jerusalem there for transportation. It was a huge hub. And that's when you see the Prophet ﷺ, even as a youngster, he takes this trip when he's only a few years old to Jerusalem, because that's where the trade routes would be. So anyhow, he goes there. And then he starts making his own money, worshiping Allah, because pretty much he did his part as king, and he said, maybe it's time for me to step away. So he's not holding on to it like a lot of these people do, because leadership has a taste, by the way. And you see what these people are willing to do to keep that seat. Anything. We're even willing to change our own laws here, right? Bloomberg did it. We sit there and we criticize, he didn't kill anybody doing it, right? I mean, that you got to hand him that. But there's other people who are taking out machine guns and chemical warfare against their own people just to hold on to a seat. Right? It's insane. It's absolutely insane. Some of them actually took the high road a little bit, if you will, if that's what you want to call it, and stepped down when they saw, millions of people protesting. Yeah, here's this king. He said, I'm moving away on my own. And he stayed living like that. So he became a milk merchant. So he used to make milk and honey. Until this story of this man, he's so righteous in his business dealings and how he was very, very fair with people. And if you want to understand the level that Muslims should be in terms of dealing with one another, and even non-Muslims, by the way, for the most part, and how fair we ought to be, all of the South Asian countries, by the way, Southeastern Asian countries that are Muslim, Malaysia, Indonesia, who am I missing? I'm not offending anyone, I'm just missing someone, right? Who? Maldives, yes. Awesome. It's a nice history about that, by the way. I don't want to get into another side tangent. But how they became Muslim because of the dealings in business with the Muslims. They couldn't believe how righteous these people were and how they wouldn't cheat anyone. There's a story about a very righteous Muslim that he was a person who sold carpets. And what he would do is he would, they were handmade carpets. You can imagine textiles, very, very big industry. He had to go and pray his salah. So he told his employee, watch over the cart. If anyone comes, you sell them. But I'm gonna go make my salah and I'll be back. He says, but I want to let you know something. There is a particular carpet that is it's the most expensive item I have. He told him it's the most expensive item I have. There is a little defect in it. There's a small defect in it. And it's just this, when you thread the carpet, I don't know, so don't act like I've never threaded a carpet before. But when you thread it by hand, apparently there's a system in doing it. And if you don't tighten one of them, it comes like a little loop. So that could kind of, ruin the carpet, if you will. So he goes, where? He goes, this right here. He goes, that's barely noticeable. He goes, it doesn't matter. Make sure you tell the buyer about it before they buy it. And I doubt anybody's going to buy it anyway. It's the most expensive thing I have. Usually they buy from this group of stuff. And he goes to pray his salah. He comes back, and believe it or not, as you could expect, this major piece is sold. He tells his employee, he says, where is that particular item? He said, oh, a very wealthy man came by, and he had some of his people with him, and they decided to carry that with them. They purchased it. We got full value for it. He said, did you tell them about the defect in the carpet? He said, I watched them analyze the carpet inch by inch. He said, I even watched them go to the defect. And he liked it. He said, did you mention to him the defect in the carpet? He said, I didn't. And he said, in which direction did they go? And he told him the direction, and he got on his ride and drove and went as fast as he could till he caught up with them. He said, may Allah have mercy on you. He said, you were sold something that had a defect in it, and I want to apologize for that. I do not want to sacrifice my hereafter for the sake of this carpet. And he said, what are you talking about? He said, open it up. And he showed it to him. He said, this is not a defect. It's perfectly fine. He said, absolutely not. You're not told about this defect when you bought it. He said, take the entire amount of money you paid me. It's free. He said, it's yours. He said, I'm not sacrificing my akhirah for the sake of this carpet. Can you imagine? I mean, you're talking about, call whatever you want. Call it $15,000, $20,000. Who has the guts to do that today? You know what we do in the supermarket? If you see this, by the way, all the new items are in the back. Like if you went to get a gallon of milk, and the one that expires on Friday, just go back a few, man. The ones that expire 3 weeks from now is like 2 rows back. You see that? It's unbelievable. The Muslims, we should be the people that are always putting our best foot forward. A woman came to Imam Ahmad, rahimahullah, and she asked him, and Imam Ahmad is one of the righteous scholars we have and we have many now today. May Allah Azza wa Jalla allow us to continue learning from them. So she said, oh Imam Ahmad, I am a woman who makes clothing, like I forgot what she used to manufacture something. So she asked him, she said, I noticed that on the days that I'm fasting, by the way, that immediately, they're fasting even outside of Ramadan. Us weaklings over here, we wait for Ramadan, we fast maybe the 6th of Shawwal, and we call it a day. Nonetheless, she says, I noticed the days that I'm fasting that the quality that I make in the clothing, it's not as tightly knit because I don't have as much strength as when I'm not fasting. Do I have to, look at what she's thinking. Do I have to separate my merchandise to say I made this while I was fasting and I made this while I wasn't? Because these may have lower value? And he said, absolutely. He said, absolutely. You understand that? And that's why I'm telling you that the news of this kind of righteousness reached the leader amongst their people on the shore. So when it reached amongst them, he sent a letter with one of his messengers, and he said that the king awaits you and he's asking you to come to meet with him. So the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, he said that this former king replied, he said, and what business does he have with me? He said, I'm not going. I'm not going. It's something interesting, by the way. You find people in leadership positions, some of them, not all of them. A lot of them, they just, and this is sometimes a blessing from Allah, sometimes it could be a curse, that they just go from one leadership position to the next, because they have that ability to lead other people. It's just a gift that Allah Azza wa Jalla gives to some people. And so he says, I'm not going. He has an idea of where this is going to lead. That he's going to tell him, I want you to be X, I want you to be Y, I'm appointing you, I don't know, head of trade or something like that. So he says he doesn't go. When he saw this leader actually says, I want to see what kind of man this is that would go to this extent and be this righteous. So he says, leaves his own palace. You see, today there's no leader, takabbur, that would just leave their White House or their big palace and say, what? He don't want to see me? I'll go to see him. When? When would that happen? You know, it's very, very rare. And so he goes to visit him. And as soon as he sees him approaching, he's a king. He's not approaching alone. He's approaching him. He leaves all of his stuff and he starts running. He starts running. So the king gets off of his ride. Actually, he starts running after him. When he noticed he's not going to catch up, he said, may Allah Azza wa Jal have mercy on you. He said, may Allah Azza wa Jal have mercy on you. He said, I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to speak with you. So he stopped running. He said, who are you? He said, may Allah Azza wa Jal have mercy on you. He said, I am so-and-so, the former king of so-and-so. I reflected over my life and I realized that what I will have will not last forever. And so after that, I decided to devote myself and worship to Allah. He did what he had to do in terms of leading and giving da'wah and volunteering for the ummah. He said, so I decided the rest of my life I just want to worship Allah. That's the kind of retirement he was looking for, if you will. So the king said, actually what you did, you're not in need of it more than myself as well. So this king, after speaking with him for some time, he gets off of his ride. He hits the ride to go away, and so they prayed and they lived together and they died for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal towards the end until the end of their life. Ibn Mas'ud, Abdullah bin Mas'ud, one of the narrators of the hadith, he said about them, commenting, they died together and they died in an area in Egypt. And I don't know if anybody's Egyptian here. He said it's an area called Rumayla. He said they died in an area in Rumayla in Egypt. He said, if I had been there, I would show you their graves as they were described to us by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Very interesting, to be honest with you. And you come and you ask yourself, you take a step back. There's a few things I'll tell you here. One, the people that I've noticed are able to really make every single salat in the masjid, to pray to Allah the most, to i'bid Allah the most, are the people in two ways. One, they're very, very financially set, or number two, their dunya is very taken care of for some other reason. Maybe they inherited, maybe they own some home which it's paid for somehow, and things like that. And the reason is because you ask yourself, anybody here a finance major? Of course, an engineering school. Nonetheless, but it's you know, they got, what is it called now? The guy put his name on the building. Anyhow, yeah. So one thing I'll tell you is you're taught a lot of rules and equations. That, well, here's income, but it's really not income, you know, because a third of your salary you work for the government, a third of the year. Then you start making money for yourself, and after that, then 40% of that. These are rules of thumb, just so you know. 40% of that will go to your living. Another about 10 to 15 will go towards your food and expenses. Another about 5 to 10, depending if you have HBO and Showtime and all that good stuff, you know, and you subscribe to all the things you'll never watch. You can only watch one channel at a time, just so you know. But I don't think we realize that. You know, they make the logos look so nice, the marketing is nice, and then they show you a nice picture of a good movie that has nothing to do with the channel, but the movie is very nice and catchy. You look at like Iron Man suit, just looks really nice. You know, well, I gotta get HBO now. That movie's been out for 3 years, but it makes you, it's part of marketing nonetheless. So, and anyhow, once you add all those up, maybe if you have 5 or 10% left, you're a lucky person. You're a lucky person. So if you can figure out income, to generate income all the time, you know, investments like that, you'll do very well in terms of sustaining yourself in the dunya. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't aim to be very, very wealthy. Remember, we mentioned that multiple times, that a lot of the righteous Muslims were very, very wealthy, okay? But the key thing here is adl, and understanding a person that is able to enact, to take a leadership role, the Prophet ﷺ called every single individual a leader in their own outright, right? That's something you never forget. The Prophet ﷺ said a man is a leader and he's a leader of his home. He said, and a woman is a leader and she's a leader of her, guarding her home for her husband and also her children. And he said everyone should take care of who they're responsible for. Very, very important. You can't think just, oh, well, alhamdulillah, thank Allah that I'm not president of so-and-so. That would have been a huge trust, a huge amana that I don't have to deal with anymore. That's not the case. You all have that in your own little outright. And if you want to understand how these people are, once you uphold that level of justice, remember verse 135, Surah An-Nisa, chapter 4, then the people around you just want you to take that leadership position because they know you're not doing it for the wrong reasons. Do you know how many people call me to tell me, oh, do you think you can tell all the guys in your halaqah and your weekly meetings or whoever you speak to vote for X, Y, and Z? I'm like, what's their stance on Jerusalem? They're like, what? That's it. For me, that's what I care about. It's really my number one thing. If you tell me, oh, vote for Phil Murphy. Yeah? For what? By the way, just so we're all clear, I vote every single election, and I mean it. And I hope every one of you do too, and I mean it. But I have nominated myself for president. I didn't win, though. I'll be honest. I am officially nominated. My name's in there. My dad has been nominated. And if anyone here would like to be nominated for president, I will nominate you. I need the correct spelling, obviously, and you will be nominated at the next election, 2 years from now, if you will. Nonetheless, and the reason is because we are not sheep. Just because they hand us two candidates, one smarter than the other or dumber than the other, if you're a glass half full type person, doesn't mean that these are the only two options we have, right? Now, if they told you these are the only two options you can choose from, then I say, yeah, boycott it and don't vote, blah, blah, blah. But that's not the case, right? You hope that you find people that will rule in favor of justice. And you see people trying to take advantage. I get the phone call, oh, vote for so-and-so. Why? Because after that, we're going to now get one of our people to vote and this. Well, who said we want him to be our leader? Or did he decide, I want a career in politics? Since when did leadership become a career? That's where I want to... Who's in politics? Who's political science majors here? That would be a nice thesis. You want a PhD in something useful instead of how fast your toenails grow per minute, or because now there's nothing else to research. You know, there's weird PhDs. I'm telling you, just go to like the medical journal. You read weirdest things on earth, man. But to be honest, they do make some changes, and it's good. It's good. But if you want something beneficial to us, I would like to know when leadership became a career. What point in history did the devil, the shaitan himself, laugh at us and make it a goal? Like you study, you get your degree in leadership. What? Well, yeah. Now, think about it. You never thought about it, but it's crazy. You can sit there and I got my PhD in leadership. Oh, so what do you? Who said we want you to be the leader? You're a self-appointed leader, and that's the crazy part. You see, these people who the people have spoken and they want them to be leaders because of the righteousness they display. The Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, like as with every other prophet, they were the most just people and honest people at their time. And just to the extent that, just to show you the level, they were about to go to war. They were about to go to war and they're about to pray in congregation. And so the Prophet ﷺ, it's the habit of the imam, it's the habit of the one leading the prayer, that he would make sure the front row is straight. Because if the front row is straight, all the rest of them will be straight. You see a little wobble, then you get a little wobble in all of them. Interesting like that, So he just looks for the row to be nice and straight. One of the companions was standing up a little bit. He was a little forward. So he took his siwak, his toothbrush, if you will, and not the part he put in his mouth. Because you people today, you think of the weirdest things. I already know what you're thinking. I wonder if he touched him with that part or the other part. This is the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so, he takes his siwak and he moves him back a little bit, to straighten the robe. He touches his chest. And then what? He said, Ya Rasulullah, you hurt me. He says, you hurt me. You remember we talked about this when we talked about the Prophet ﷺ's justice. He said, you hurt me. He said, how did I hurt you? He said, you hurt me with the siwak. The companions are looking around, what a punk. What's he talking about? Straighten up the line? So what? He says, okay, go ahead. Here's my siwak. He said, no, that's not fair. He said, I didn't have my shirt on. So you hit me on my bare chest. I didn't. You're wearing your shirt. So Prophet ﷺ unbuttoned. He said, go ahead. And then what did he do? He just ran and he hugged the Prophet ﷺ. And he said, Ya Rasulullah. He said, we're about to go to war. And I don't know if I'm going to make it alive after that war or not. He said, and I'd rather the last thing my face touches is your chest. That's not because he's the self-appointed leader. It's got to be more than that. It's got to be more than that. It's got to be the example that he showed all throughout his life about how fair he was, right? I'm telling you right now, and I'm not mocking. I would have never thought if somebody told me you hurt me, and I took this straw and I moved them back a little, and they said you hurt me. I said get over it. Most of us would say that, but after you hear the statement of the Prophet ﷺ, well, you got. You see, it's just these little things to show you if he was fair and just in that little regard, in that little moment, then what was he with everything else? What was he when he would distribute the money around to the poor? What would he about spending his time with his family and distributing it fairly all throughout his life? That's something very, very important to know. So, one thing I want you to make sure, and this is very important, you one day will also have the ability, and I ask Allah that He gives you this ability, to be parents. You're not thinking about that right now, probably. You probably have a final tomorrow, or an exam, or a midterm, or whatever's coming up. Hopefully you're not stressing a Halloween costume, because that would be weird. But nonetheless, one thing I'll tell you is that you have to take a step back and say, what the statement Umar radiallahu anhu said, that you should learn before you lead. A lot of the scholars mentioned that he was talking about this in also parenting. So some of the things that you should teach your kids at a young age is to share, not to be so materialistic over things, how to be responsible. We do not teach children responsibility, accountability. We really don't. And that's something that we have to understand very much so. We should always emphasize on the akhirah, and never at the expense of the akhirah. The dunya, never at the expense of the akhirah, ever in your life. And a few other things. I want you to understand something. Whenever you come back and you say, because your parents sometimes, they'll give you the story, a nice story, and you should listen to the story. Pay attention, close your phone, listen to the story when they tell you a story, because it might have some wisdom in it. They say things like, well, when I was your age, ... You know what's coming. You were either on a farm, you were barefoot walking for 10 miles. You know, they want to tell you I was roughened up. And, you know, you guys, you got central air condition. And if you're hot, you go up and you hit it a few times. And then you want to walk around in shorts 24 hours, 7 days, 365 days a year. It's just like a weird generation we are, you know. They laugh at us, you know. We got to defend ourselves somehow. So the way we do that is we start taking on responsibility. They don't think we're responsible at all. I mean it. I'm not kidding. Chores like cleaning the bathroom or you know, taking out the garbage on Tuesday and your brother got it on Friday. That's not responsibility, right? Taking on true responsibility, working, trying to pay for some of your school, saving up for marriage shows this kind of effort that you're putting through. And you have to do that yourselves. You have to figure that out. You have to go dedicate some time and volunteer and roughen yourselves up a bit. And that is from the Sunnah. You remember when we talked about the Prophet ﷺ and how he recommended every now and then to walk barefoot? You remember that? If you don't, yeah. And that's not to, yes, see? That's to tell you to not just live this life so comfortably all the time. And that's what we should also instill in the next generation, because we should raise them for how the people are being raised in their generation. But we should instill in them responsibility and whatnot. And last but not least, I want you to never forget this. Ibn al-Qayyim, he said something very interesting. He said, Bir al-walidain is a command from Allah Azza wa Jal. Having excellence and righteousness is a command from Allah. But raising your children is even a bigger command. Because the reason I'm stressing this, you might not think about it now, but those people will one day be the leaders of us. And if we forgot this now, if we didn't take the time to make the sacrifices for the next generation, and it cannot be about the me, me, me. You ask a girl, hey, are you ready for marriage? No. Why? Well, I gotta graduate, gotta do my master's, then my PhD, then I gotta work for 3 years, and then I'll see somebody. You got gray hair by then. I mean, what's going on? And then you gotta get another guy with gray hair. You don't want the guy with gray hair. I don't want to get into the details. This is not the topic. That's like not the right time. That's like an off-camera discussion. You don't want that guy, right? You figure it out, and it doesn't mean you can't do things multiple at once. That doesn't mean that you're not responsible or you're trying to juggle so many things at once. When you get married, it's a support system. It helps you throughout your life, alhamdulillah. Same thing with guys. I know a bunch of guys, and it's not that I'm knocking on the sisters. I know a bunch of guys who absolutely refuse to go and start looking for, to get married. Why? No, until I become vice president of company X, Y, and Z. And here we go again. Who said they wanted you to be vice president? That's the funny thing. You know, I don't get it. And that's the thing. I want to be CEO of X, Y, Z. They don't want you to be CEO. They've got a guy groomed since he was 7, and you think you're coming in the way of that? This is I'm not saying not to aim high, by the way. I'm telling you to aim very, very high. But don't make that this focal point of your life. That's insane. That's insane. Then you get the gray hair. I'm warning you about that. Anyhow, so the leadership as Muslims and understanding about justice, because that becomes ruling to be the most fair you possibly can be in your lifetime. Honest people. That's how we become Muslims. That's how we show everyone who's not a Muslim what this religion is about. Because this religion is very different than any other religion. And I really mean that. Because it's not just by us acting a certain way. It's because, here's the kicker, there's a reference for acting that way. Someone else might say, well, I'm good too. Well, who told you to be good? My mom. Okay, so your mom's right. She didn't tell him to do that. So is his mom bad? No, I didn't say that about his mom. I'm talking about nobody's mother. See? Then what happened? Where's your reference? Who told you to, be good, and how do you define good and things like that? We believe, alhamdulillah, that we have that miracle that will last till Yawm al-Qiyamah, and that we just have to implement it so that other people could see that beauty, bismillah. Alhamdulillah. Does anybody have any questions? May Allah Azza wa Jalla allow us to unite with that king and both of them and see who they were in paradise. And again, not named. Not named. We don't know who their name is. But these were just 2 people worshiping Allah, and till the day of judgment, we will know their story.
So
Yeah.
I have a question about the story you told us about the carpet merchant who found a defect in his carpet. I heard a similar story about one of the Sahaba who also, is that a different story? Or?
No, it might be it. Could be the same one, yeah. And you'll find these statements all throughout the companions, where they would, some of them donated the entire store, if you will, because they were late for a prayer. They said, this is what got in the way of my salah. Take the entire thing for free. That's guts, man. I'm dead serious. That is guts. You'd probably be like, you know what, I'm gonna set the alarm twice next week or tomorrow, and I'm not missing it, mashallah. You say, oh yeah, got himself a second iPhone and everything. This guy went and donated the store. I'm talking about, man, that is iman. That's iman. That's why they are really in their own generation. That doesn't mean that nobody could just donate the store here. I mean, that would be amazing. But you see, they did it because they had a reference trying to get close to Allah. That's something very interesting. May Allah Azza wa Jalla allow us to not be too far away from them. Because I know we're away. It's just about how far we're away. That's the key thing. I mean, y'all. Does anybody else have any questions? Sisters? Going once? Going twice? أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله ولكم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. جزاكم الله خير. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.